got the great big campus, but you know, there's kind of like sitting right adjacent to it, just a very small little plot of land right there, less about an acre, and that's the Walker Family Cemetery.
Okay.
So when Freeman Walker, who by the way he worked for the Georgia Georgia Assembly, he was a U.S. senator, he was a mayor of Augusta.
Right.
But when he sold the property, it was about 400 plus acres of land. He sold it to the Confederate government, and that became the Augusta Arsenal. That was because they chose to have that as property there. But anyway, one of the deals was that they kept that one piece of property, the 1 acre would remain the family cemetery. So
and it is still there today.
And it's still there. So the reason why I bring this to your attention is because obviously that's where, because she was in that family, Octavia Walton LaVer.
And that's right off Walton Way.
That's right, Walton Way.
That is so crazy, and that's where a potential connection with Edgar Allan Poe is.
That's right. So that's two
so
connections
cool.
integrate. So let's talk about Augusta University. The last thing that I could see was about maybe 2015, but there has been, I don't know if you guys knew this, but there has been in the past, Augusta State University has been on the list of within the top 10 scariest or haunted campuses in the country.
I have heard that.
I've never heard that.
Now,
You must have not done
Not
all-nighter
specifically
in college.
so we're going to start off with
the library is terrifying. I will attest to that.
Reese Library, the haunted Reese Library.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So what I thought I'd do is let's talk about some of the confirmed ghosts that have been seen through the years.
Let's do it.
The biggest one of all that people talk about, and I will tell you right now, I have friends that have worked at university, and I'm talking people that are very skeptical, people that just would not, you know what, I don't subscribe to that kind of thing.
Right.
Maybe you guys have heard this, but over the years, the biggest and most reoccurring spirit or ghost that's seen on the campus, even today, in fact, it's actually to the point where he's even seen sometimes during the daytime, and that is, you'll hear people talk about the Confederate ghost.
Yes,
Right.
I have heard of that.
So the story goes back, one of the earliest records we have that we'll talk about in more modern day times is there was a former professor, this is back in the 60s, that had been at the university, or of course back in those years Augusta College, but but he was talking with a fellow colleague out in the parking lot, and he saw someone in the evening time that was walking across kind of the border, and this gentleman was dressed in a gray, what he thought was a costume. In fact, actually, I think the initial idea or the conjecture was, well, maybe this is somebody that's, one of the performing, he's an actor or something like that, doing one of the plays there at the school, and he's just walking home. Well, it ends up that they're watching him, and as he went across, it was a gray uniform, and it is talked about in every key story that you hear, and this is the one consistent factor. Everybody acknowledges that this character or this individual has a yellow sash around his waist.
Interesting.
Now that would signify that that's a Confederate individual, that's an officer of some sort. But the same story time and time again, you see him walk across, and he gets to that iron gate of the Walker Family Cemetery, and he just disappears.
So you obviously know his name.
Well, it's conjecture. I mean, could it be maybe Freeman Walker himself, or maybe one of the other Walkers? I mean, one of his sons. We don't know, but there is definitely obviously some unrest that's there. But he's seen it. In fact, I have a friend of mine that several years ago was working. She had gone to work as part of the admin, and again, one of these people that's very skeptical. And I can remember today where she had called me in so much excitement. I mean, almost out of breath. She said, "You're not going to believe it. I actually saw him go across the campus."
Has anyone photographed this ghost? That you guys are so certain exists?
That's a good question. Well, and of course, and I would imagine probably not, just because of the fact that he would be kind of like our local Loch Ness, I guess. Have to kind of capture him.
There you go. Somebody needs to.
Or Bigfoot. But yeah, to my knowledge, I haven't heard anybody but at the same time, most people are kind of catching him on the kind of the last minute type thing, and there he goes.
So now he seems kind of peaceful. Are there any
Well, there is some arrest. Of course, now we'll start with also the two main houses over there that are probably that they say are the most haunted on the Augusta University.
In the middle of campus.
Yeah. Is we've got Bellevue, which by the way was the original home of Freeman Walker, who owned the property, and then also the Benet house. But Bellevue is actually pretty much the oldest house that's there. But that's the one that's got some kind of neat stories about it. So after it was sold as it became part of the Augusta Arsenal, there was a family that lived there by the name of Galt. And there were two daughters that lived in the home. And the story is that, and their names were Emily and Lucy. Emily was the youngest, but she apparently had been the story is that one of the young soldiers at the arsenal they had fallen in love, and then he had presented her with a diamond ring for engagement. And so in her excitement, apparently they were upstairs, and she took her diamond ring and she scratched her name in the glass.
Yes.
Her sister Lucy came and took the ring and did the very same thing. And by the way, this is absolutely true, because now I actually made a phone call today to Reese Library to see if they knew where it was. I do know that it happens to be in storage. They just weren't able to confirm where it is, but they took the entire pane of glass and it's in storage, but it does exist. So their name's right there. But so the story is that the young man was killed. And so what happened was that out of her despondency, Emily supposedly, she opened up the window, she threw herself out the balcony and killed herself. So it's a suicide type thing.
Right.
Now, there has been some stories that have surfaced over the years, which is that Lucy, apparently there's a possibility, again, this is nothing confirmed, but there is a bit of the alternate story of this, that perhaps Lucy happened to be falling in love or was jealous of the thing, and maybe Emily didn't jump out the window, maybe that she was pushed instead. See, but people that have been there, that have been able to do some haunted type of, paranormal kind of studies and things, or at least they've said that there are two different spirits that they feel. One is like a real kind of calm, light-spirited, and the other one is very angry. So that's probably more of the Lucy character that's more of the angry spirit.
I have heard that, and I've heard that there's screams that happen. Obviously, these are all telltales, or possibly just rumors.
Yeah, and we're telling you the story, but there again, the real kind of haunted feelings are the people that work at the university that
Right.
still feel this stuff. So,
Yes.
for example, they will hear in the evening time, maybe they'll hear like in the distance, maybe the voices of two girls arguing, that kind of thing, and feeling cold in the room, the kind of classic kind of signs and things that you see on these paranormal, supernatural type of shows out there. But,
What happened to Lucy?
well, there's also again the extended story in that is that one of them apparently went and died in an insane asylum. So maybe she just went bonkers. I don't know, but those are kind of the background stories. And of course, the other story is that you'll hear talk about is the Benet house, which is the stories. There was a couple of things that happened. There was that happened to be the house for the second in command of the arsenal at the time. And there's one of the classic stories they talk about is there was he, being the second in command, was busy, and in his time off he would go hunting, or he did have a wife that was she liked to live beyond her means, and she loved to dress up in clothing and so forth, and anyway, the story is that he supposedly left one morning after having her tea brought to her. He left, and the maid came up to bring up another tray of tea, not expecting there was already one there, and this woman, the wife, was on the floor and she was dead. So apparently poisoned.
Ooh.
Now they said that they weren't able to find any fault specifically with her husband, so we don't really know who the fault was. But there again, that's another location that is considered pretty haunted for that, because a lot of people have they hear like they see like a clothing that'll rustle in some of the closets and that kind of thing. So it's definitely seen a lot on that campus.
Definitely a lot.
So,
go ahead.
I was about to say, so we talked about AU, we talked about the graveyard. Is that why maybe you're dressed up like a gravedigger?
Well, I am, and I've just been digging a lot of fresh graves lately, and I've got the headstones with the names of David and with Chris.
Okay. So David and I are kind of freaked out. Do you have anything that's gonna really freak us out?
Well, I'm not going to give away the farm, so to speak, because as you know, you guys, I do haunted history tours of Augusta.
Right.
Looking forward to getting those running again, hopefully in the near future.
Talk about that for a second.
Well, we've as with I'm sure last time we talked on the show, we talked a lot about trying to remain positive during these COVID times.
Right.
The tourism industry as a whole, has really taken a big hit, but we all remain positive. And the great thing is that if I was still doing the trolley tours that I used to do years ago, we'd be having a whole lot more of a different situation. But thankfully, we're going to be getting back to kind of my original origins, which I started a walking haunted history tour all the way back in 2004. So we're getting ready to start those again. The great thing about being outdoors is we can kind of social distance ourselves, which is a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
We're also taking some time and doing some investing on some equipment and so forth that we can extend it to the point where we can really give our guests a good, safe feeling too. So
That's good.
I've invested in a nice audio system for that, but yeah, the best thing to tell you all in terms of just make sure that our guests can go to, if they are interested in looking at future tours, best way to do it would be just to go to our Facebook page, which is, facebook.com/Haunted Augusta Tours. And we'll be posting information about that, so that's the
Like the
best
page, follow along.
That's the way to go.
Alright, so we are here, we've heard a couple stories, and I'll be honest, I've been really excited about a story that you told me pre-show that you were gonna talk about. We haven't gotten to it yet.
Well, do you wanna talk about the Partridge Inn, or how we doing on our time?
I think I would love, let's start with the Partridge Inn.
Okay, alright, so the Partridge
But I
Inn.
really am excited to hear about the pillar at the end.
I can't wait to tell you about that too. That's actually,
I have
Sure
not,
missed it,
I
sure
have
missed
not,
that.
I have not touched
Well,
it.
this is exciting, in fact, because we are.
I have touched it.
And because we're doing a live show, I'll be able to show some really cool pictures of that too. Okay, so, real quick, very, very quickly about the Partridge Inn. The Partridge Inn is, if you look it up, you go look, it is considered a haunted hotel.
If you go there, I think you
Well,
can
yeah,
easily.
well, here's the deal, they actually have a ghost by the name of, this is our second Emily that we're gonna talk about. We talked about Emily Galt over at the Bellevue.
Right.
This is Emily, and we really don't know her last name, but she's kind of the classic ghost bride story. So, if you go back to the history of the Partridge Inn, it at one time was a very small little house. It was actually owned by the Meeks family. If you're over that way, you got Meek Street right
I
there.
used to live on
Yeah.
that.
Well, there you go. It was actually John and Elizabeth Meeks who owned the house, and of course then later on you had Morris Partridge, who happened to be the general manager over the part of the Bon Air Hotel, kind of keeping his eye on there, and he bought
Right.
it, and eventually it became what it is today, which is kind of interesting because the main core of that house is still buried in there someplace.
It is.
It's there. It's really cool. But anyway, the story is that when it was the Meeks, they had it opened up, and there was the story of a young lady that was staying there she was getting married, and her fiance, this is during the Civil War period, but he was on horseback, and he was down in the valley, down in Augusta. He was actually mistaken for a traitor, and he was shot and killed on his horse. So the news comes back up to her, and she's of course devastated. The people at the house were they were just so horrified for her that they didn't ask her to leave. So she stayed there. So the story is that she stayed there for quite some time. I mean, they would bring her food, and oftentimes
I've heard about this.
they would see her still in her bridal dress. She eventually did go. She never married. She died an old woman into her late 80s, and then, but her spirit is still seen today. I was just talking today with somebody that used to work there, and they were kind of giving me some background information about this. But I wanted to know so we could pass along to our guests. And if you ever go to the Partridge Inn, you want to ask for room 427. That apparently it's on the 4th floor, and apparently room 427 is the one apparently that's got the most activity. But we're talking where.
Is that where we're staying next Halloween, Chris?
That's it. Live from the Partridge Inn. It's the Halloween special.
Infrared camera?
I'm sure we could get that.
Easy.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's what I hear. But they still see her today. I was talking to somebody not a short time ago that was saying that they worked there and had only been there for a very short time. And we're talking like lights would go on and off, and like the water would turn on by itself. So she's definitely an active, and people see her, just kind of see her walking down with their dress.
Why have we not been profiled by some massive ghost TV show?
Well,
Where are they? Where are the ghost hunters?
We have a couple times. Now, we'll have to talk about this some other time, but I got a chance very humbly to be on a show called American Supernatural, which is in conjunction with the Weather Channel. But you guys,
Yeah.
you ever seen Ghost Asylum years ago?
No.
The Tennessee Wraith Chasers. Oh my gosh, they're great. They came to Augusta, and they ended up doing an investigation of the old Sibley Mill before it became what it is today with
Right.
the cyber section and so forth. Anyway, so let's take this virtual tour downtown.
Okay.
And let's get down to the fun part which you wanted to hear about, and that is the legend of the world famous Haunted Pillar.
That's right.
So you can actually go on, next time you guys get a chance, go into Google or whatever your favorite search engine is. You can type in the words the Haunted Pillar, Augusta, Georgia. You'll get at least 40,000 hits. I mean, it's world famous.
If Chris and I close our eyes right now, can you paint a picture of where the pillar is from?
Yeah, sure. Well, we could certainly do that, or if you want, how about I could show you some fantastic pictures about that. So I'm gonna show this to you all first.
Yeah.
I
Then-
see it.
Then I'm gonna do this over here to the cameras over here at watching
Excellent.
and see this right here. So what you're seeing, David and Chris, this is actually a picture of what is known as the Lower Market. Now, this would have been circa about maybe, this picture was right about maybe around 1840s or so that this would have taken. At the time, this was a place of commerce. It was like the farmer's market. It was the busiest place at Augusta at the time. And for those people that live in the area, let's say you and I were to drive downtown, get down to Broad Street and Fifth Street. That was the area.
Okay.
In fact, most people know, if you don't, you can travel down there, we gotta be explorers, go down there, and in the middle of the median, you'll see a historic marker that talks about the haunted pillar downtown. It's still there today. So, as this legend has been going on for so many years, this is something that's been standing around for well over, almost 200 years. Not that, but very close to it. So, as you take a look at this picture, again, this is the lower market building. And if you take a look, guys, on the front here, you've got 4 main pillars, which is kind of underneath the portico.
Yes.
Right.
All right. So the story is, back in those days, they had obviously their rules and regulations at that time. You were not allowed to hold anything of public, you weren't a public protest or anything public, but much less you weren't allowed to, they weren't allowed to preach. Now you gotta remember, at the time period this was taking place, the United States was going through what they called the Second Great Awakening. And so we had a lot of churches, most of our churches were built during this time period, and it wasn't uncommon for perhaps different ministers of different faiths to come into the area and to want to build their churches and have their particular brand of religion to go forward. So the story is that the legend is about this haunted pillar is that there was a wandering minister that came into Augusta, and he was here to basically to preach.
Start a church?
Yeah, exactly. And so it is said that he came in and he began preaching, and the people of Augusta said, "Hey, you got to get out of here." And he was pretty resilient, of course, and you know he was going to get his point across. Well, it got to the point where it got a little bit on the angry side. They decided to physically move this guy, and I can only imagine they pick him up and they toss him out. I kind of, in my mind's eye, you see him where he's picking himself out of the dust and grabs his Bible. But what he did was that the legend is that he came over and he placed his hand on one of the columns. And it just happens to be this one. If you look at this picture again, it's going to be this one over here, right there. And he placed a curse on Augusta. And he predicted that there was going to be a mighty wind that would come and destroy this building. And the only thing that would be left standing would be that one column to remind the people of Augusta of their defiance of him and of God's church. And then he left. Well, several years later, we had a weird cyclone tornado that came through Augusta. And it had a winding path, and there were a few people that were killed, unfortunately, destroyed a few things. But when it finally met its spot or its destination on that lower market, I mean, you can imagine it just lifted the entire building off of its foundations. And that was February 8th of 1878. Ironically, happened to be the next day after the destruction. There was a photograph taken. We presumed by someone that was obviously made with the staff of the newspaper at the time, that took a real picture. And this is I'm going to show this to you guys because this is really kind of a chilling picture. Take a look at this right here.
Whoa.
You see that?
That is the same pillar that he touched.
And you can see it right here, right there, solely standing by itself.
How much can you say coincidence?
It's really strange. This is why Augusta's so famous for this kind of thing. But we were talking about this pre-show, and that is that the haunting aspect of it is because a lot of things have happened through the years with this. There have been people that. So there's one story about a truck that was coming around the corner that had a big. Maybe you guys heard about this. There's a large bale of cotton, and it cut the thing too short, and it hit the pillar. It broke it, but the driver himself was killed as a result of that. There's another story about a gentleman that had heard about the curse and decided he was going to be the guy to take it down, so he backed his truck up and he connected a chain to it, started to pull it, couldn't go anywhere, and apparently later on that day, farther out, he was killed in an automobile accident. So now I've had people on our tours in the past that have had some experiences themselves, feeling like they just, they have felt something as a result of that. So I haven't had anybody. Now, of course, as you guys may know, back in 2016, at the end of 2016, we had a drunk driver that hit it and destroyed it. So it's unfortunately, it's in pieces. By the way,
Did you ever touch it though?
Many times. In fact, I hugged it all the time. So
Love it.
I guess I'm kind of immune to it, but I always said that, what if this is the way I would talk about the tours, that I hugged it all the time, but eventually maybe something bad was going to happen to me, and they're going to go, touch that.
Yeah.
But I would actually, truly, I would actually.
You would make history.
Oh, and it was really kind of funny because at the presentation, you could get people and they're really standoffish, they don't wanna get near it, and I'm like, pretending like I'm not really I'm gonna be real hesitant to touch it. And then I would just totally just jump it and embrace it real quick, and they, the gasp, and you
Right.
talk to vacuum outside, it's crazy. But it was a lot of fun, but that's the thing that's so fun about Augusta is we are the second oldest city in Georgia. We're only 3 years younger than Savannah, and Savannah, you guys may know, Savannah is considered the most haunted city.
Right.
And which is kind of surprising to me, because you'd think like Salem, New York, or something like that with all this but yeah.
A couple years back, I went, when we went to Savannah, I picked up a book, not too big, and it was Haunted Georgia. That was the title of the book, and I kid you not, 2/3 of the book was about Augusta, Georgia.
Yeah, it really is. Again, it's just, we've got so much going for us here, we really do, and it's like one of those things we talked about last time is, you gotta get out and explore. I mean, this is the way it's going. There's so many fantastic, really kind of fun stories that are out there that exist that are just, really just great.
So let's wrap it on this, Michael, and thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
If you could recommend a haunted destination for somebody, what would that destination be if they wanted to just really freak themselves out?
I would say truly, in my opinion,
Yeah.
and this is based on my experience, this is why we want you definitely to make sure you make plans to come on our tour sometime. I don't want to give away the farm, so to speak.
Of course.
But I would tell you, in my opinion, probably the most haunted spot in Augusta, believe it or not, is the old medical college over on Telfair Street.
That's part of your tour.
It is part of the tour, and what's amazing is that, I say that, and that's like one of the #1 places for people to.
It's a wedding venue.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, And that's another great story, but I mean, honestly,
A haunted wedding.
the stories that come from there will just, there's obviously good things and bad things about it, but at the same time, it's the kind of thing that it puts hair on the back of my neck stands at times. And to hear the people come on our tours, by the way, I've never been an individual that's really seen anything before.
Mhm.
But I have plenty of people that come on the tours and they like to share their experiences afterwards, whatever, but, man, that's a great place to go. That's a big recommendation, and I'd love to be the one to be able to, share those stories with those people.
Thank you guys. Follow him on Facebook, Haunted Tours Augusta, right? And that's not just Halloween, it's year round.
Haunted Augusta Tours.
Haunted Augusta Tours. Follow him on Facebook, like him on Facebook. You'll be starting operations soon, and people will know where to go.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Michael, for coming with us today.
Absolutely, my
This was
pleasure.
a great time.
Love it,
Absolutely.
yes.
And thank you guys for watching on YouTube Live.
Yeah. Happy early Halloween.
Yes, and this episode will
Yeah.
be out next week.
Next week.
Perfect. Awesome. Excited.
Peace.
Easy.
That was